Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into an incredible story from ancient times. A story of faith, courage, and promises fulfilled that still echoes with power in our lives today. We're talking about Joshua and Caleb, two men who stood firm when everyone else faltered. Imagine this, a massive nation, the Israelites, after generations of slavery in Egypt and a miraculous escape, finally stands on the border of a land promised to their ancestors. 40 years of wandering are almost over. Just across that river, just over those hills, lies Canaan, a land described as flowing with milk and honey. Can you feel the anticipation, the hope, the sheer excitement? They've come so far, seen so much of God's power, and now, the ultimate prize is within reach. This wasn't just any land, it was their destiny, a place of peace and prosperity. But before they could cross, a crucial decision was made. 12 leaders, one from each tribe, were chosen to scout the land. Their mission, to bring back a report on its strength, its people, its resources. Among these 12 were two men whose names would become synonymous with unwavering faith. Joshua already, Moses' trusted aide, a strong and wise leader in his late 50s. And Caleb, a determined and resilient man in his early 60s, full of life and conviction. For 40 days, these 12 men explored the land, seeing its beauty, its bounty, but also its challenges. When they returned, the camp buzzed with excitement. Everyone gathered, eager to hear the news. The spies presented their findings, and initially, it was everything they hoped for. They displayed giant clusters of grapes, pomegranates, and figs. Proof that the land was indeed incredibly fertile, just as God had promised. It truly flows with milk and honey. They declared and the people cheered. This was it, their promised inheritance. But then, the mood shifted. 10 of the spies, their faces grim, continued their report. However, they began, the people who live there are powerful. The cities are fortified and very large. We even saw Anakites there, giants, and the Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, and Canaanites live in the hill country and by the sea. We looked like grasshoppers in our own eyes compared to them, and so we were in their eyes. Fear began to ripple through the crowd like a cold wave. The emphasis wasn't on God's power, but on their own perceived weakness. They focused on the obstacles, magnifying them until they seemed insurmountable. The people who had witnessed 10 plagues in Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, manna from heaven, and water from a rock, suddenly forgot all of it. They heard the giants, the fortified cities, and their hearts melted. A murmur grew into a roar of despair. They started weeping, crying out in the night. If only we had died in Egypt, they wailed, or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will become plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? They even began to talk of choosing a new leader to take them back to the very slavery they had just escaped. It was a complete and utter loss of perspective, a tragic amnesia regarding God's faithfulness. But amidst the panic, 2 voices rose, strong and clear. It was Joshua and Caleb. They tore their clothes in distress, a powerful sign of grief and urgency. The land we passed through to explore is exceedingly good, Caleb declared, his voice filled with passion. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Joshua echoed his conviction, reminding them of God's mighty hand. Their message was simple, yet profound. God had promised, and God would deliver. The challenges were real, but God was bigger than any giant, any fortified city. Their faith wasn't blind optimism. It was rooted in a track record of divine intervention. They saw God's promise as more real than the visible obstacles. But the people were too consumed by fear to listen. Instead of embracing this message of hope, they picked up stones, ready to stone Joshua and Caleb for daring to speak against the prevailing tide of doubt. Just as the situation reached its darkest point, the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting, visible to all the Israelites. God himself intervened. He spoke to Moses, expressing his profound disappointment and righteous anger. He had seen their grumbling, their rebellion, their utter lack of faith, despite all his miracles. And so, a solemn judgment was pronounced. Because they had refused to trust him, because they had despised the promised land, that entire generation, 20 years old and upward, would not enter it. They would wander in the wilderness for 40 more years. 1 year for each day the spies explored the land, until every single one of them had perished. Their bodies would fall in the desert. It was a heartbreaking consequence of disbelief and disobedience. However, there was an exception, a beacon of hope in the midst of this judgment. Joshua and Caleb, because they had a different spirit and had followed the Lord wholeheartedly, would be spared. They alone, of that generation, would enter the promised land. This wasn't just a reward. It was a testament to the power of their unwavering faith. They didn't just believe, they acted on that belief, even when it was unpopular, even when it put them in danger. And so, the Israelites turned back into the wilderness. For 40 long years, they wandered, a generation passing away, never seeing the land they had so foolishly rejected. It was a period of humbling, of learning, and of a new generation rising, one that would be forged in faith and obedience. Moses himself, due to his own act of disobedience, would also not enter the land, seeing it only from afar. Finally, after those long decades, the time came. Moses had passed on, and Joshua, now the appointed leader, stood ready to fulfill the divine promise. He was around 90 years old, still strong, still wise, still filled with the Spirit of God. And by his side was Caleb, now 85 years old, his determination undimmed, his vision for the promised land as clear as ever. This new generation, seasoned by the wilderness, now stood at the Jordan River, ready to cross. Under Joshua's leadership, they performed another miracle. The Jordan River parted, just as the Red Sea had done for their parents. They crossed on dry ground, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, a powerful symbol of God's presence. They entered Canaan, a land they had only heard about, a land their parents had feared. The battle for the land was long and arduous, but Joshua and Caleb led with courage and faith. They remembered God's promises and acted on them. We see Joshua leading incredible campaigns, like the miraculous fall of Jericho, and Caleb, even at 85, displaying incredible strength and zeal. When it came time to divide the land, Caleb approached Joshua with a remarkable request. He didn't ask for an easy, fertile plain. He asked for Hebron, a mountainous region inhabited by the Anakites, the very giants that had terrified his generation 45 years earlier. "Give me this hill country," he declared, "for you yourself heard that the Anakites were there and their cities were large and fortified. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out, just as the Lord said." This was Caleb's moment of full circle. He wasn't afraid of the giants. He trusted God to help him overcome them. And indeed, God was with him. And Caleb drove out the 3 Anakites from Hebron, claiming the land for his inheritance. It was a powerful demonstration that faith isn't just about believing in the promise, but about courageously stepping into it, even when there are challenges. The story of Joshua and Caleb teaches us so much. It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't the absence of fear, but the courage to act, despite it, trusting in a power greater than ourselves. It highlights the stark contrast between focusing on obstacles and focusing on God's unwavering faithfulness. The 10 spies saw giants and felt like grasshoppers. Joshua and Caleb saw giants and knew that with God, those giants would fall. Their lives exemplify obedience, perseverance, and the incredible reward that comes from wholeheartedly following God's plan, even when it's unpopular or difficult. They didn't just inherit the land. They inherited a legacy of trust and courage that inspires us even today. What giants are you facing today? What promises have you been given that you might be hesitating to step into? Let the story of Joshua and Caleb ignite a fire of faith in your heart. Remember, with God, all things are possible. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through such an impactful story. If this message resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more content that explores faith, history, and inspiration. Your support means the world to us. See you next time.